Hi, it's Rob from Brush and Boltgun. Today I'm going to be doing a tutorial on how to paint gemstones. If you'd like to support the channel, our Ko-fi and Patreon pages are linked below. Now on to the video. The first colour we're using is Citadel Ahriman Blue. What we're going to do is paint each of the gemstones that we're doing with a nice smooth coat of Ahriman Blue. On this I'm going to be using the front little gemstones down there, and then the ones on the almost like metallic cape on his back. You want to make sure each one of these has got a nice smooth coat of Ahriman Blue. Once done, we can move on to the next section. So I'm not going to show all of this because it is just adding blue to each of those. And then on to the next part. So next up, we're going to be using Citadel Drakenhof Nightshade to shade each of the gemstones. So all you want to do is give them a good coat of Ahriman Blue so that you get the shade all the way around the edges of the gemstone. So even if this is when you highlight it, you want to keep that little bit of shade around the edge of each of them. So if you get it going right the way down to the bottom of the gemstone, that is all the better. So give each of them a nice coat of Drakenhof Nightshade. Now we can move on to the next colour. The next colour is back to Citadel Ahriman Blue. What we're going to be doing here is doing almost like a half moon kind of shape, a slight crescent on the bottom left hand side of each of the gemstones, so that you'll have that kind of little dark blue section at the top right of each of the gemstones. It's almost like a crescent, quite a wide crescent, on the bottom left hand side of these gemstones. Obviously if you want the light reflecting off the other side, you can do it on the bottom right. I tend to keep it on the bottom left just for ease. If you watched any of my other videos, you'll know that I find doing the bottom left section of any circle the easiest part to do, so that's probably why I do the gemstones this way. It's always been fairly easy. So whichever way you do them, or whichever way you find yourself painting them naturally, and the easiest way for you to paint it naturally, go with that. So as you're doing these are quite big gemstones, and it's very similar to the way that I did the Imperial Night lenses. You've also got the really tiny gemstones down the underside of parts of this kind of metal skirt that he's got going on, and also on either side of it. So you want to be doing the same for them as well. Use a smaller brush if necessary, because they are very, very small gems. But just keep doing that, working on them all the way through. Then we can move on to the next colour. So now what we're doing is adding a little bit of Vallejo White. And this is going to be to do a slightly smaller crescent within the crescents we've just been doing. So say the previous crescent was about 50% of each gemstone, this one's going to be about 40% of each gemstone, so that you will have that Ahriman Blue around each side of it. Slightly off camera here, but you will see them in a moment. There you go, you can see that going on. I'm using a smaller brush here. I think I'm using the Army Painter Insane Detail brush here, maybe. No, it's the Wargamer character brush I'm using here from Army Painter. So you just want to be doing that kind of 40% crescent on each of these sections, each of these gemstones, so that you will have the Ahriman Blue around each side of it, and still have that Drakenhof Nightshade Blue at the top right of each gemstone. Seems to be the bottom ones that I'm incapable of getting on camera. So just carry on doing that across all of the gemstones. Then we'll come back and onto the next layer. The next layer we're going to add a little bit more white to the previous mix. And we're going to start doing maybe about 30% or 25% of each gemstone the way we did the previous layer. So you'll have that Ahriman blue with the previous highlight, then you'll have this highlight. So you can see here I'm doing some of the smaller ones on the inside, because why make it easier for yourself when you're doing them. Now we're just going to add the highlights to these gemstones on the back here, slightly off camera once again, but they will work their way up. Maybe a little bit too much on that one, but it doesn't matter. Once we start adding the other layers, you won't notice that whatsoever. So keep working through all of the gemstones. We can get to the next one. Final layer is going to be just plain white. I'm using Vallejo White here. And all we're doing is a tiny little thin line on those crescents. This will give you the final highlight on the bottom left of each of these gemstones. So you want that really thin white line there. Then you want to get a tiny little spot of paint on your brush, and you're just going to put either 1 or 2 dots of light on the top right of each of the gemstones. What I tend to do in the case of the bigger gems, I'll do 2 spots, and in the case of the smaller gems, I'll do 1 spot. Like so. Keep just adding these spots to each of the gemstones. I'll give it that reflected spot of light. And the final thing that we're going to do is use a little tiny bit of Citadel Drakenhof Nightshade, and this is going to be for the areas on the top right of each gemstone where maybe you've got a little bit more Ahriman blue than you wanted to, or you've made those spots of light a little bit too big, or even if the shade hasn't really darkened down the top right of it, we're just going to darken those down so that you have the light reflection in the bottom left, and then you're going to have that slightly darker area in the top right where you're adding a little bit more Drakenhof Nightshade. Once you're done with these, I always spray it all with matte varnish, but any gemstones like this, I will use Citadel Hard Coat, as it has a nice gloss finish. It really does bring out the shine in those, and it looks absolutely stunning once you've got the actual paint on the gemstones and then that gloss varnish just to give it that extra little shine. Once done, you will have the gems painted up like this chap as he rotates around, and he will have a rather funky looking cape. Thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and if you have, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future content. Also, think about subscribing to some of our other social media linked below. Thanks very much. If you like the channel and you enjoy the content, please consider supporting Brush and Boltgun. Our Coffee and Patreon pages are linked below. Thanks very much.